For more, let's welcome in retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer and Newsmax columnist and former executive director at Iranian Americans for Liberty, Bryan Leib. Good morning.
Good morning, Krisha.
Great to have you, gentlemen. So, Colonel, I'll start with you. We were headed towards a permanent ceasefire. Hamas refused to negotiate, and now Israel is beginning ground operations in Gaza again. This just seems like a massive step back. You, of course, were predicting this next step. What do you make of all of this?
Well, yeah, I said we'd never get to phase two because Hamas was not negotiating in good faith, which has been abundantly clear. So what we have to do now with the Israelis, United States, to put pressure on the Hamas leadership. Remember, the Israelis have eliminated most of the local Hamas leadership within Gaza. I think they took out 5 of their leaders. And then the other leaders living the life of Riley, literally, in Oman and Qatar, are the ones that have to really make the decisions now. So one of the things I think President Trump's going to do, I don't know, didn't speak to the White House, but I think this is where it's going. They're going to put pressure on those individuals, those leaders that are not there, to say, you really got to give up the hostages or else we're going to come after you. I always remind people that President Trump has no problem going after leaders who are not in their country. For example, General Soleimani, who was the leader of the IRGC in January of 2020, he took him out because the Iranians were behind the evil deeds in the Middle East in the first administration. They are again now. So I think President Trump, will make sure that leaders of Hamas recognize there's going to be a consequence to their bad behavior. And I hope they will act in their own interest to stay alive, to give up the hostages, but we'll see.
Colonel, I think you're right. You bring up such a good point. This is a president who means what he says and says what he means. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he discussed the new offensive earlier this week. This is what he had to say.
Hamas refused offer after offer to release our hostages. In the past 2 weeks, Israel did not initiate any military action in the hope that Hamas would change course. Well, that didn't happen. And this is why I authorized yesterday the renewal of military action against Hamas. In the face of pure evil, free societies have no choice but to fight. So I want to assure all our friends around the world, Israel will fight and Israel will win. We will bring our people home and we will destroy Hamas.
Bryan, it seems to me like Israel may be past the point of negotiating. I hope that's not the case, but I think certainly this is another resolute leader who lives in a very tough neighborhood. But what does this mean, Bryan, really, for the message? What's the message for the hostages that are still in Gaza? What does this mean for them?
You know, it's good to kind of level set here just for a second. Diplomacy with terrorist organizations, with terrorist states, likely succeeds because you're not dealing with rational actors. When Israel is dealing with Hamas, they're dealing with a terrorist organization that would gladly kill every single member of their own people just to survive or just to kill one Israeli. So you know the Israelis are. It's tough. Obviously, they're balancing this narrative or this dynamic inside of Israel, where you have some of the country that don't want to go back into Gaza, and then you have another large percentage of the country that is imploring Prime Minister Netanyahu to go back into Gaza. So it's a really tough situation, I think, for the Prime Minister. But just to bring back to what I said in the beginning here, diplomacy with terrorists is always going to fail. The only language that any of these terrorist organizations or terrorist states like the Islamic Republic of Iran understand, guys, is strength. They don't understand weakness. They don't understand, could you please do this? Could you please do that? They only understand strength. And I think that's what we're seeing the pivot here with Prime Minister Netanyahu. And that's what we're also seeing with President Trump being back in the White House less than 60 days. He's hitting targets in Yemen, the Houthi targets. I mean, it's peace through strength. That's how you deal with terrorists.
Well, yesterday, Israel's Supreme Court froze Netanyahu's government's decision to dismiss the head of its internal security service. Colonel Netanyahu said he wanted to remove the leader over his agency's lapses that led to the October 7th attack. What do you make of the court's decision here?
Well, the Israelis are having the same problem we're having with lawfare. I mean, look, I don't know the Jewish constitution, but I'm pretty sure the executive is given extensive and clear authority to do what's necessary regarding domestic and national security. And yeah, this is one of those inconvenient facts that we've all kind of been whispering about, but it's going to have to be resolved. Is what happened on the 7th of October? How did those lapses happen to that level? This was their 9/11. And heck, we still have issues from our 9/11 we haven't resolved. So I think at this point, it's abundantly clear that there's something else going on, because Benjamin Netanyahu, had a right to fire anybody he wanted within the government. And this guy apparently there's some questionable activities relating to what happened on the 7th of October. So I think this is going to continue. You're going to see folks within the Jewish state try to avoid, like we've seen on our side, accountability for the failures. And I think this is the beginning of that attempt to avoid accountability for those failings on 7 October.
Such a good point. Bryan, final question to you. I know President Trump, you'll remember, he sent a letter earlier this month to the Iranian leader. And according to Axios, he gave a 2-month deadline for the nation to reach a new nuclear deal. Bryan, for years, we've feared Iran could be close to enriching its uranium enough to start building nuclear weapons. Do you think Tehran is listening to the deadline?
I think within an hour or two after President Trump sent that letter to their supreme leader, the supreme leader of Iran took to Twitter to basically rip the letter up and say that he's not going to engage in any kind of diplomacy, and he's not going to be told what to do. And again, this is when you're dealing with terrorists. The only language they understand was strength. But I will say, this was a master chess move from President Trump, because he is exhausting every avenue possible before potentially military action. President Trump